How are you? So today we're going to talk about goals, objectives, and outcomes. We had some pre-meeting discussions about how that part might not be our most favorite. But let me tell you that part focuses you. I mean, all of this focuses you, but that part really focuses you as the center of your proposal. It might not be the most fun to write, but really, that's what your funder is buying. So you have to pay a lot of attention to your objectives and outcomes, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to be different because of your project. And so when someone decides to fund your project, you sold them on the need, like we talked about last week. You sold them on the need, like, oh, the situation's so bad, I have to fund this project. And then you propose how the world is going to be different after your project. And that's what they're buying, that difference, that outcome. So that's why it's important to dedicate time to that. There's a couple of us that weren't here last week. So for those of you who were, what are one or two of the takeaways that you had from last week about the vision and the needs section?
So one thing that came up were the comments about how specific or how general to make the vision. I thought that was kind of an interesting contrast. Should it be, like in my case, like it might be around climate change, like mitigating the negative consequences of climate change. But the grant that we had worked on, the communities grant, it seemed like it needed to be way more specific. At least there had to be a lot of really specific points in it to make it viable by the the folks who are going to accept the grant. So I guess that's the question that came up for me, is like how general to make the vision.
I think that's a good point. Like, you think about the vision as a really big picture. So the vision is mitigating negative effects of fossil fuels and climate change, or preventing climate change. That's the vision, the goal. So we're getting smaller. Vision, impacting climate change or preventing climate change. A healthy environment for us, bright, shining world, right? The goal is, in Stuart's case, improving or having to do with sustainable energy at UH College. So, wisely using the energy resources, not only for the campus to achieve net zero, but also for the community, right? So that may or may not be your goal, but that's the goal. And then your objectives are steps that you'll take to get there. So vision, goal, objectives. You may have vision in the project, but you probably will as far as broader impact that your proposal will have.
So in your view, then, it's still really useful to have a very broad vision that encompasses a lot of different goals and objectives and so on.
Yeah, so the vision is kind of your broader impacts. If you're writing an MSF grant, you're always going to have broader impacts. But I think any grant, you're thinking about what is the bigger picture that you're working towards. But your goal is very specific to your project, but still a little bit general, not too general, but specific to your project. But your goal isn't measurable. Your objectives are measurable little steps that you'll take to achieve your goal. And your goal is a smaller part of the vision, right? It's a one piece that you might have. So that's a little bit about for the people who weren't here, needs. What did you learn about the needs section that stood out to you? Hi, Velma. We're doing a little bit of a review. Okay. So I think I'm asking what stood out about the needs section and going over the needs section last week.
Okay.
How important is the needs section?
That's one of the most important parts.
How come? Says Melissa. Maybe other people would argue that, right? Why do I think it's one of the most important parts?
Well, it starts you off to, I guess it engages the reader, maybe. You have to tell them why you're even writing this. So what is the purpose?
That's just, yeah. In addition, though, that's the section where you sell your idea or your concept, or that's kind of where you establish the main importance of the project, or yeah. Is the need like the gist of the proposal?
The need is kind of the problem. So it's kind of the purpose of the proposal, like why you're doing the activities that you're doing. Why are you proposing this project? So I think it's very true. Like it's engaging your reader. It's the advertisement. It's selling your project. So the need, you want your reader not to say, "Wow, look how good they are and how bright and innovative they are." You want your reader to be like, "Oh, that's heartbreaking. I really feel like we have to do this because it's so bad." Right? So you you want them to feel for you that they have, through your data and through those stories that you weave together, you want them to feel like this is so bad. We have to do something, so that they join your team and they're rooting for you to sell them the best idea possible, because we have to do something. I think I shared one thing that I didn't put in my notes that I shared that stuck was that was like, okay, that is an important point. Like, I don't really want the target population to read my grants because it looks so bad. I mean, I know people have all these like great ideas and strengths and capabilities and resilience. And so I attribute all those positive aspects to whatever my target population is, but I don't write about them. So say like I write a lot about the Hawaii Department of Education, like pre-college programs, right? I might talk about how bad everything is and how bad a job they're doing. So if every once in a while, like a principal or a superintendent wants to read it, I'm like, it's embarrassing how bad you write. That's what you need to get the grant. Okay, so don't feel bad. Just put it in there and maybe sell it. So we're gonna move forward to talking about goals and objectives. So this is when you start to talk about what you're gonna do. What you're going to do about that really pressing problem. A minute to get my screen set up. Oops. Hold on just 1 second. Take that away a second. There we go. You see the PowerPoint again, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to talk about goals, objectives, and outcomes. So this is, again, what I said is when you're starting to say what you're going to do about that pressing problem that you presented. So the goal is the larger picture. And for those of you who might have come a little bit late, we talked about the vision last week. So there was a little bit of confusion, like, how big is the vision? The vision's huge. It's a bright, shiny world. It's going to happen. It's positive. It's what will be in absence of the problem. But your goal is specific to your project, and your objectives are steps towards your goal. So the goal is the larger picture of what you will achieve. So your vision is more than you could ever achieve, but your goal is what you're going to achieve in this project. And so the funder is actually buying your objectives and outcomes. This is what's going to be different once your project occurs, and they buy into that and they give you money to achieve that. So when you kind of think about goals and objectives, this is a chart I made. I couldn't seem to copy and paste it over, so I screenshot it. So it's a different color from a different slideshow, but the goal is the focus of the project, and it's your foundation for your objectives. Your objectives are steps to achieve the goal. when you think about objectives, there's two types of objectives, and I'm going to talk about them. I think that one type is better than the other, but I'm going to talk about them so that you might stay a little bit more away from process objectives. So process objectives are actions or activities. It's what you're going to do. And outcome objectives are the results or the impact of your project. So I'd say that you want to more stay with the outcome objectives and stay away from process objectives. But sometimes a funder or a project might ask you to do process objectives. So goals are the big picture, as we said before. They establish the direction and focus of your program. So this really focuses what you're going to do. They define the scope for the program, the scope of what you're going to achieve, the foundation for the objectives. And I would say choose maybe one, preferably one, maybe 2 or 3 goals. So you don't want to have all kinds of goals, have objectives under each goal. So you want to be selective. And I really do think goal generally is sufficient. But sometimes there's projects that they might tell you what your goals and objectives are, or they might want you to have more than one goal. So you have to read the solicitation to know. But I think that generally one is good. You just don't want to have so many goals and objectives that's going to be hard to achieve, and that's more ends up being more than you probably could accomplish. So that's what I'm saying. No more than 3. Maybe just 1, maybe just 2. So I'm going to give you a goal for my workshops. If I were writing a grant regarding these workshops, my goal might be attendees will build skills and confidence to find and apply to extramural funding opportunities. That might be my goal for these workshops. So your objectives are steps to achieve your goals. They define your goal. Really, like these are the steps of what you achieve to do it. They're building blocks. They're quantifiable statements of program achievement. And I would say 1 to 3 objectives per goal. So you want to keep your project manageable. So 1 goal, 3 objectives is probably plenty. 2 goals, 4 to 6 objectives is probably plenty. 3 goals, 6 objectives is probably plenty. You just don't want to have too much. You don't have pages and pages of what you're saying that you want to do, because your project's going to be too big. You won't even be able to write about it in a proposal, and you probably will have difficulties achieving it. So I've said this before, but the fund is buying your objectives. So an example, given that my goal is that I want attendees of these workshops to apply for funding and be able to apply for funding. So my objective might be something like attendees will seek out and apply to 1 funding opportunity within 1 year. So that might be an objective that I have. So when we talk about process objectives or activities, so I kind of want you to stay process objectives, because they're not really what's going to be different about the world. They're what you're going to do. So there are activities and actions, and like I said, try to minimize and not include them. So an example of a process objective with my goal for these workshops is a series of 10 grant writing workshops will be held in spring 2021 for a minimum of 10 participants. Will I be able to achieve that? Yes, because I have complete control of how many workshops that I hold. Maybe I won't be able to control if there's 10 participants or not. So, I mean, but it's what I'm going to do. So I would try to encourage you not to have these types of objectives, because they really don't leave the world in a better place after your project is over. They're not like a huge thing for your funder to buy. I encourage you instead to focus on outcome objectives, and that's the impact of your project. So it states the difference your project will make. It's the result, impact, or benefit of what you're doing with your project. And this is what your funders are buying. So an example of an outcome objective would be participants will apply to 1 funding opportunity within a year of completing the workshop series. So that would be an outcome objective. Is there any questions about the process and outcome objectives? Okay. So who's heard of SMART objectives? Right, we talk about them, we talk about like goal setting, or SMART, using SMART goals. I think when you're doing goal setting, so your objectives should be SMART. They should be specific. Who is doing what? Measurable, so you can quantify them. Achievable, like is it realistically possible? Can someone really do that? R, relate to goals. Is it logically a step into the goal that you want to achieve? And T, time bound. So does it have a time frame that you're going to accomplish this objective in? So you want to make sure your objectives are always SMART. Your goals is not this. Your goal might be what you want different, but it's not going to be SMART. Your objectives are each going to be SMART, and you want them to be measurable, so someone can tell if you achieve them or not. So are these objectives SMART? Let's take the first one, which was a process objective. A series of 10 grant workshops will be held in spring 2021 for a minimum of 10 participants. Is this SMART? How so? How is it specific?
It names the number of participants, the time frame, and the purpose of the workshops. Number of workshops as well.
Yep. But I could really tell if I achieve this or not. Does it seem realistic? Probably. Maybe 10 is high, I see, for 10 workshops, but it's possible. What about the second one? Grant writing workshop completers will apply to one funding opportunity within a year of completing the workshop series. Is that one SMART?
It gives a result or an outcome.
Should you put like the amount of completers, or that doesn't matter? You don't have to put that.
No, I think that was my next question. How could it be better?
Oh, okay. I don't know.
How could it be better? I think you said it. Like, what would make this better?
Well, I think, because you're talking about measurable, like the 1 year is measurable, like, but then maybe if you put the amount of completers, that would be more measurable, I guess.
Right? Am I talking about 100%, 50%? Who knows?
Yeah.
Right? So if I put like X percent, like 50% of attendees will complete the program, will apply, right? And is that realistic? Is 50% realistic?
Huh?
No.
I don't know. I guess I feel something's incomplete because it's like there's no benchmark or something. Like there's nothing to start with. That's where I'm like, okay, how do we know we met the outcome?
Right? So there's no idea to know if that's realistic or not. If I had, how could I start to have a benchmark for that? What might be the benchmark?
Probably something prior to spring 2021 or something, or, like this is how many grant writing you did. And I mean, you kind of have to build a story, I guess.
Yeah, so maybe like what is the outcomes of past grant writing workshops? It could be.
Yeah, then you can measure whether you want to increase it 25%, 50% as far as the outcome, right?
Yep. If I said I had grant writing workshops last year and 0% or 10% applied to a grant, right? Then I would know like maybe 50% is too high, maybe it needs to be 20% or 25%. Another benchmark that I could possibly use is just a percentage of faculty and staff who write grants. institutions. So trying to increase it above what is without my treatment of these workshops, right? Without the activity of doing the workshops.
Right.
Yeah, so sometimes there's different benchmarks you can use, and sometimes you have to go with what you can obtain.
Is a percentage really an appropriate metric if you're talking about only 10 people? Or would it be better to say X number of grants will be discussed or approached or whatever, right? Because if you're talking about 10 people, then 50% is 5 of those people. And they may not all have something they want to look at. But if that one person goes breakout, applies to 20 grants, that's a type of success too, right?
Right, that could be another way of phrasing this objective that might give me more flexibility. To say that out of the grant writing, from the grant writing participants, 5 proposals will be submitted. And that might be more accurate than saying 50% or 5 people will apply for grants, right? So that would give me, that would be easier to achieve. And it also is another way. As far as the number versus percentage, I think that's a personal preference. I don't know if it matters as long as you can quantify it. I actually really like the idea of proposals versus participants. I hadn't thought of that, but that's actually kind of smart because it's easier to obtain it in different ways. 5 people could write 1 grant, or 1 person could write 5. And so then I have more ways to achieve my objectives. So that's smart.
Smart as in specific, measurable, achievable, relatable, and time bound.
And that's why you have, it's good to have multiple people. There's another pre-workshop discussion we had about having multiple people look at your proposals. That's why it's good to have other together to brainstorm and to put into grants. You know, grants don't have to be just you working. They should ultimately be teams of people who bring more to the table than just one person. But yeah, as far as number versus percentage, in this case, if it was just 10 participants, I might say 50% or 20% because if I was stuck on participants, I would use that because it sounds like more versus saying like 2 participants will write proposals, right? That sounds kind of weak. But if I say 20% will, and that's higher than 5% of all faculty and staff, I don't know how much it is, I'm just saying, yeah, but 5% or 2% of faculty and staff writing grants without support, that 20% will, then it sounds high, right? So it's also what you're comparing it to. So if I'm comparing it to a percentage, like the percentage of faculty and staff overall at the institutions that write grants, so say 2% that write at YCC and UHMC write grants and proposals, then I would use percentage because then you could see like 10% or 15% is much higher than 2%. So I guess it depends on what I'm comparing it to. It depends on what sounds better to me. If 20% or 2 people sound better. Sometimes they tell you they want numbers. Like if you actually get, some grants ask you to specify your outcomes separately from your objectives. So your objective might be 20% will write grants, 27% of people write grants. Your outcome is 2 people will write proposals. So your outcome is generally how many. But your objective, I tend a little bit more to percentages, but that's just a personal preference. But your outcome really is a number, and your objectives tend to be more percentages because they tend to be your benchmark objectives. But if I was going to say how many proposals, that would have to be a number. So just dependent on what you got and what sounds best. So what sounds biggest, I guess, to achieve.
While still being achievable.
Yes, while still being achievable. Your objectives are a fine line between achievable and ambitious, right? It's a fine line, and that's a personal way that people were going to see it. So you're going to have to explain about your objectives. Like you list your objectives and goals objectives, but generally there's some discussion under each objective of how it's a bit ambitious and attainable. So you want that balance of the two, if that makes sense. so that they don't decide that it's too ambitious or that it's not ambitious enough without your input. You're going to tell them why it's ambitious and it's attainable. It's ambitious because it's more than your baseline data, and it's attainable because of the services and activities you're going to do. So I'm going to give you an objective. So here's my example. X% of high school graduates in the program will enroll in college the following fall semester. The project serves low-income students. What percentage should I use? What would you say just seeing this? What percentage would you give me?
Yeah, 25. I agree.
Okay. Now let's see. We have this stat. Oh, so I have baseline data. 58% of all target students enroll in college the fall after high school graduation. Now, given that baseline data, what would you make your objective?
$45.
45?
45.
If you percent in the need section that are already going to enrolling in college.
Your aim is the people who are low income students, and your baseline data is the entire population of the school.
Yeah.
It seems really ambitious to say the same amount of percentage in that one program year. Perhaps if this was the 5th year of the program, then it would be, we can bring it back up to the regular population, whatever, but.
Year program.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I have garbage is going in the background here. Let's assume that's a multi-year program.
Then yeah, I would say bring it up to match or exceed the baseline data.
So like 58%, possibly. If you lower, you have to make the argument that these are low-income students, right? And in the comments, maybe 75%. Maybe if I just had that data, I might say 68%. Something like that, if that was the only data that I had. Okay, baseline data 2. 47% of low-income target students enroll in college the fall after high school graduation. Now you have 2 points of data. So you have the data for what the program serves, and then you have what everybody's doing. So what would you use as a percentage?
Could you just meet the baseline data of 50, or is that like too aggressive?
No, that's probably what I would do.
If it didn't ask specifically for a percentage, I would say something along the lines of meets or exceeds the general population rate.
I think for your objectives, you need to put something measurable. You need to put something, make a commitment to something. Some number. It's hard, right? Because I hear what you're saying. I think that sounds good, but I think you need to commit to something. You need to have data points between. So in the comments, 51%. So that's possible. It depends on. So this is, what before depends on if your program is 1 year, 5 years, how intensive your services are, how many students you serve, like if you want, how high you want to go. So if I was having a more intensive, comprehensive program, I probably would want to meet the baseline data. If it was like a program serving thousands of kids, I might just bring it up a little bit. Maybe 51% or 45 or no 55% or something like that. I mean, that it's just, and you have to kind of look at what's realistic too. So sometimes you're running programs where you know the data for your program. You don't put that in here, but you just kind of, if like the TRIO programs, for example, and gear up to, the percentages, the baselines that you've hit with your program participants. So you know, when we make these objectives, we're like, hey, can you do that? Is that achievable? But as you see, the more data that you have, the more you know if you can achieve it, and the more that you can argue what's achievable or not achievable. So, like, who are your question? Do we know how many of the students in this baseline data complete college or remain in the degree program? That would be a whole separate objective. So that wouldn't necessarily, we have that data, but that wouldn't support this objective. That would be like a separate objective or something different that you might be doing. So I'm going to share one link that I shared last time for those of you who weren't here. That's some of my most common data sources. So you could download that. I emailed it last week too, but just in case you missed it. So I have a sheet of the places that I use the most, which is mostly on the first page. Once it gets the second page is not as used, but that's where I comb through data. I mean, you might have other data sources that are really good, but I tend to look at everything to see what I can get. So I had that. And now we're going to work on your projects. So if you don't have a project, you can support somebody in your group. I made another worksheet for you. Let me share the link to it. So we're going to be working on you stating a goal and objectives and outcomes. And like I said, if you don't have a project, just really help the other people in your group focus in on this. Okay, I'm going to make 3 groups. So 3 people in a group. Okay, so here we go. And maybe we'll be there for like 15 minutes or so to work on it, and then we'll come back and share what we have. And I'll jump around between the rooms.
What else? What other needs need? And then that's when I started thinking about youth and sports, youth and activity. Because now that, you know, hopefully we can overcome this COVID thing and kind of try to get ways to, you know, bring normalcy in some way, or, you know, kids being more active again after being inactive for a year plus, you know. So that's where we started talking story about that, like how can we get the kids back more engaged and all that kind of stuff. And then we morphed into other things and stuff, but it was a really good insightful discussion on how you know, the different islands too look at that, you know, how different islands look at kids and their activities. So
yeah, there's a lot of needs, and it's helpful to brainstorm and make connections. And also, let me tell you, there's no confessing that you haven't done the work. I have no expectations for anyone to do the work. I mean, these are just exercises in thinking that can help you if you have a project, but also help you think about the grant writing process. So, so it's just learning. So don't feel guilty or bad. Don't let that prevent you from coming. There's no expectation. Just to come and share and learn. So one of the other groups wants to share.
Hey, everyone. So one thing that came up for me personally was around the specificity, making it really specific and aiming directly at what the grant is looking for. So again, I felt like the last time around, way too general, try to accomplish too many things. And this time I would focus specifically on, for example, letting Maui College operate, letting Maui College have electricity, even if the grid goes down. That would be my goal. Yeah.
It makes writing your proposals much easier if you have one focus. I mean, so you have a lot of things that you want to achieve, but to pick a small pathway at one piece of the problem makes it manageable even to write about. It makes it easier for your reviewers to read it. It makes you be able to meet your page limits easier, but I think it just helps it be more accomplishable too. So, as far as applying, it's accomplishable as far as doing, but it's more accomplishable as far as writing, being specific and not trying to accomplish too much. Winnie, Brooke, anything else?
Do we share our goals and objectives, or we just talk
Yeah,
about
you
what
can.
what we were
I'd love to
talking
hear.
Okay, and then I'm really open to suggestions. So my goal is to engage and familiarize high school students with Mo'olelo through comic book form. And then my one objective is adapt 2 short, well-known Mo'olelo from Hawaiian language newspapers into comic book form. I don't know. What do you guys think? I don't know.
Okay, I've got to comment, Melissa. I have to. The answer is yes, with a capital YESSSSSS. Because anything to do with high school students and reading and writing couldn't be more timely based on the data of how much we lost in the past 14 years.
Yeah.
That is all I do on the Kikaluke is tutor 2 days a week.
Wow.
7:45 until 2:30, tutor virtually on Saturday mornings, and they just don't have enough, not just enough understanding and comprehension of basic reading, but just the comprehension of what.
Yeah.
And if they can get excited and motivated about Mo'olelo or something and attach to it naturally, then you're going to automatically build their skill sets without telling them, reading at this level and you're at this level, and and so they know, right? The Kikis know they don't get it. They don't need us, the grandma and uncle, and the other time, you're such a low kid. They know. They see their stuff. They see the assignments before we. So something like this, super exciting and really necessary. I say we book it, Daniel.
I'm excited too.
Other
Sounds fun.
the objective.
She's asking your objectives, so.
No, other feedback from other.
Oh.
I saw Velma thinking.
Brooke, did you, you said you want to convert 2 stories to graphic form. Did you give a timeline or?
No, I didn't. Okay. A timeline. Yeah, that should.
And then what are you gonna do after you have those 2 done? You're just gonna quit and right?
Oh no, yeah, that's true. Well, I was trying to keep it small because I was like, oh, I would really like to develop more, but I felt like if I get like it's a longer thing, like 4 years rather than just 1 year, or okay.
Or maybe like establishing a process where X number of whatever gets converted per X number of years or whatever. And then,
okay,
I don't know, you could think really big. My brain is saying, get the students involved with creating them, because students are super creative too. But that might be beyond the scope in a totally different project.
Well, I was thinking about just I wanted to hire Hawaiian Studies master's students, graduate students, and then Hawaiian Studies graphic designers or whatever. So at least they can pay for this college while they're going through school, and then it would be good for them because they have all that resources in their brains and they can put it together.
Sure.
I don't know.
You can use it like internship program, high intern.
Yeah, internship.
Yeah, and it gives them the opportunity and the experience they needed. Yeah.
Even mentoring too, internships and mentoring.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Brooke, have you given any thought to the M in measurable? And that's a fun rabbit hole to go down. And I
Yeah.
think it goes back to exactly what the overall goal is, if it's to increase their their reading and writing scores, or is it to increase their awareness of self-identity in relation to Hawaiian cultural topics. I could see you could do post and pre-testing or things like that, but have you started to think about that yet?
Well, I know I just wanted to focus on awareness, like not necessarily, like of course, like reading and retention is important, but I guess I feel like if you hit the students early with like mo'olelo that are relatively, like, because people talk about all these mo'olelo outside, but if they got it from like this, that is relatively well known, but it's like the legit what happened, maybe later on they'll go read the original mo'olelo from the newspaper or from wherever book, and then that will build. Like, I guess it's just awareness and engaging in something that's theirs. I don't know if that makes sense, like that, but not necessarily, I'm not going to necessarily focus on the reading retention thing.
I think the trick for most grant opportunities, and not all, and especially ones that are related to Hawaiian, depending on the funding opportunity, it's got to be something that you can report back on. And so sometimes it will look like number of students who reported self-confidence in or awareness of
A story.
Mhm.
So then, but how would I actually do that? Like, would I have to like take a survey and like, oh, do you know this person? Maybe like ask like a bunch of students in the high school, like, do you know this mo'olelo? Do you know this god or something? And then try after, maybe like do a post and or pre and post to ask it like that.
Yeah, and if your goal is to increase their organic engagement, then you could do like a immediately after, a month after, 6 months after, and see if they reach out to that type of material having been exposed to it.
Okay.
And to what the theme of what today's program is about, centers also around data. What Khalid was saying is that you want to do that kind of pre-work to know what's not being done. Remember how earlier Melissa was saying, you want the funding to go, we're gonna help. Yeah, here's the money, let's go. And that having data that shows that there is a real less, if not minus, awareness of Hawaiian newsletters.
Okay.
Whatever, even reading in general, and that's universal. Yeah? That encompasses
That's true.
our culture, but there's a lot of funding for education, staff, and raising the art. So taking data from a target school on a reading level and compare that reading level to a national level of the same age group, that hey, I've got this connector that I believe because of really find that as a goal that can build that bridge from. That's it's there. Yeah, I think that's what I think that's what we're learning from this. There's data everywhere. We just kind of pass it every stop sign and we don't look on the side to see what it is. And I think there's a whole
Okay.
that's necessary.
Oh, thank you.
I'm wondering if another way to get at what you're trying to reach to is this engagement and awareness is if your objectives and outcome include some sort of, and it's totally off the cuff here. So like they get together, they read the mo'olelo, they create a comic book, and then they teach it and bring this to their peers and to others. So that your objectives is that they create a comic book in this time frame. It's measurable in that they bring it and do a workshop for their peers. and you can count how many, we always have to count, right? So how many of their other students attended, and then they can ask their peers some of the questions that you're getting at. Are you more likely to read, or are you more interested in reading Hawaiian material? I mean, this is, hopefully this spawns somebody else to come up with an idea. This isn't the end all be all, but like maybe this is a brainstorm too. But like a way for, yeah, like peer mentoring. I think we were starting to talk a little bit about it. Maybe they're going into a younger grades to bring these to a literacy awareness, or something like that. Instead of Dr. Seuss's birthday, it's the elementary schools are celebrating
Yeah,
Ka'au in this way.
that's true.
The focusing, because we're going off in lots of directions on you.
Yeah.
You're going out, you know.
They're really good though. They're really good. Put them all down.
We're going off in a lot of directions. So I think, I mean, you would want to focus, and from what I'm hearing from you, Brooke, some of your intent is the awareness of these mo'olelo, right? The awareness of the stories and having them engaged. So I mean, so you want to focus your objectives around that engagement. And you have a lot of good ideas about that, you know. And you think about if you're doing two, so where process objectives versus outcome objectives too, right? So process is creating the process. That's an activity. You're creating those.
Oh, that's true.
That's okay, because if you're looking at like a humanities grant, that might be okay as an outcome, you know, or preserving Hawaiian culture or literature type of grant. You know, the outcome of just creating it might be sufficient, but also you're looking at engagement, because in your ideas, it sounds like you're saying that you feel like this is going to engage the students. So you want some measure of engagement.
Okay.
Is, and you can look at it, and you had some good ideas, or cultural identity. If that's one of your focuses, there's some measures of that, or you could create some kind of pre or post. But like, what are you going to do with the books created, and how does it tie into your assumption? You have an assumption that this is going to engage students, right? So you
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
It's exciting to watch your project grow and your ideas become more formal.
Yeah, I didn't realize it takes like so much work, like just not with you, but with everyone to do this, you know? Okay. Thank you, everyone. That was very helpful.
Anyone else want to share?
I can share. I can share mine. So I put my my goal. I have two goals. I'm just gonna with one, one goal and three objectives for each goal, and I'm still kind of refining it. It's just a draft. So the goal number one is to develop a sustainable tourism certification program targeting visitor industry personnel, specifically mid and senior management level employees. So that's my goal. My objective one is to increase sustainable tourism practices awareness in management level employees to reach 100 employees per year over 4 years. Objective two is to establish 35% more opportunities in the visitor industry that focuses on social culture, environmental and economic development to benefit visitors and locals. Objective three is increase hospitality and tourism employee retention rates by 35% over a 3 years period. So those are my three objectives for my goal number one. I have goal number two, and I also have three objectives. I'm not going to go into it. We are almost out of time. Yeah, I'm open to your suggestion. Yeah, it's I guess it's still in draft format. Yeah.
Winnie, can you repeat objective number two, please?
Yeah. Objective 2, which is establish 35% more opportunities in the visitor industry that focuses on social culture, environmental and economic development to benefit visitors and locals.
What do you mean by opportunities? You mean like activities, or you mean like internship stuff, or?
It could be anything.
And what is 35% being compared to? What is 35% more of, you know?
I know. So I'm still playing with the number, the best way to do it, because and I'm like, okay, if they're not doing any sustainable tourism practices, anything is better than nothing. So I'm like, okay, if they do one, it's already 100%, right? So I'm like, 35%. So I just kind of pull a number, because if I say 100%, they can really just do one if they're not doing anything. But if they're already doing something, so yeah.
Is there a way for you to like reach out to your contacts in the discipline, I guess, and figure out what the average rate is, and see like this place does 100% of their stuff is sustainable, this place does none, you know, and come up with like a goal for meeting the industry average?
Yeah, so I look at the bigger company, let's say Hawaiian Airline, they have more, but yet versus then a small tour operator probably have very little bit, but yet it's still and I'm trying to look at, okay, I try to keep it small. If I make if I make objective too high, then somebody with not a whole lot of, a company with not a whole lot of resources, they can look at it too challenging to achieve that, and they're just gonna scrap it. So I'm thinking, okay, if I go in, if my certification program come in and say, here's the objective, starts, you have create something, maybe target 35%, a little below half, is more achievable. I don't know. But I definitely see your point. If I survey, I can probably survey company like Maui Hyatt. Maui Hyatt is excellent. I know the engineer there, and he just retired. I mean, they are excellent. They recycle a lot of things. They reuse their water and everything. They have a really good, they have a lot of sustainable tourism practices there. So I can, again, now we're looking at different organization, different size. A Maui Hyatt versus then a Hilo Hawaiian hotel, very different. So yeah, but a good point. I'm kind of still struggling thinking about how do I establish that measurable components. Do I say 5, 10?
Or maybe it's a percentage for each company.
Yeah, I started looking at breaking it down and based on revenue size or based on the number of tourists they serve. So I started thinking about doing it that way too. Yeah. And that's how I came to the objective one, where we need to reach 100 employees per year. So I started looking, okay, we need to have a baseline, so many employees. Yeah.
Winnie, have you defined what is sustainable tourism?
What is sustainable tourism?
Yeah.
Is not in the goal, but that would be part of the when I developed the program, it would be in there. Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, have you personally thought about it? What the specific measures would be?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe your objectives could be something more along the lines of each operator, I guess, does something that is relevant to their service that they provide. Like if it's a tour company that uses buses, maybe they could work toward having CNG buses or electric buses. And then like a hotel company could be, or a restaurant could be like using local sustainably farmed ag for their food kind of stuff, and have it be really personally relevant to each organization. instead of just broad overall, like everybody does the same thing.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. Do I limit them, or I mean, do I say based on their what they do, or do I keep it broad?
And then are you gonna, whoever is gonna talk can talk.
Go ahead, Brooke.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe you should, I mean, I don't know, it's your project, of course. But then maybe you can think about maybe just targeting certain really not so good hotels. You know what I mean? That really need the help to, like, you know, because if that other hotel is doing really well, they obviously need a little bit help. But then if you focused on really the, you know, like how sometimes we focus on the different categories of people, you know, like the lower income or this or that, you can focus on hotels maybe that need a lot of help with that. I don't know, it might be more like big, less big, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I can do that. In the objectives, I can tailor it even more, be more specific for maybe organization under certain revenue size or certain organization size. Yeah, I can do that. That I can be, yeah, that probably. But the challenge is small organization, they have less resources. Big organization, but they have more resources, but doesn't mean they're doing it. But,
Oh,
good point.
I have a idea. You know how it kind of looks like you're looking at a statewide approach.
Yeah.
Maybe find data or something that goes by county, and then you can see who's suffering and who's doing well or whatever. So then you can kind of find a medium, right, of how well Hawaii as in general are doing in sustainability.
Good point.
Yeah.
Lots of really good questions and feedback. I'm just impressed with everybody. Lots of things to think about. So a lot of times in grant writing, it's just an exercise about narrowing down, defining, figuring out what you're doing, picking one piece of your bigger idea, sometimes that may get overambitious, and really thinking through how you're going to measure it, what groups you're going to target. So all great questions. I want to thank you all for your time today. I don't want to go too far over, but next week we're going to talk about budget and budget narrative, which is exciting too, because your budget, if I look at a project's budget, I can tell what you're doing, right? And so it tells a very important story that in a succinct way that quickly tells the reader what you're doing. So we're going to talk about budget and budget narrative next week if you are able to join. I just want to thank you all. Such good conversations and feedback to help refine all these different projects and ideas. So thank you. And we'll see you all next week.
Okay.
Bye.